In the sprawling universe of the Galactic Concord, where countless species vied for dominance and power, the concept of hierarchy was unquestioned. The Arath, a towering species with unmatched intellect, sat at the top of the food chain, controlling vast star systems. Beneath them were the Vornai, a militaristic race, the Selkai, known for their artistry and diplomacy, and the Kestris, a hive-minded species who excelled in technology. For millennia, the Galactic Concord had been an unshakable institution, with each species knowing its place. The Arath had engineered their ascendancy through both cunning and brute force. They had once conquered the galaxy, turning any would-be adversaries into allies, or subjects, through a combination of political maneuvers, military might, and economic dominance. It was a system where power ruled and smaller, less capable species submitted. However, deep in the forgotten corners of space, hidden within a nebula that even the most seasoned navigators avoided, something ancient stirred. The Zorlan Nebula, as it was known, was a place steeped in mystery. No exploration team had ventured far enough into its depths to uncover its secrets. For ages, it was considered an afterthought in the grand scheme of the galaxy, a forgotten region that didn't warrant attention. That was until a lone ship, a relic from the days before the Galactic Concord, emerged from the nebula's heart, its hull battered and worn from centuries of isolation. The ship, known as the Pride of the Lost, had a story to tell that no one had ever expected to hear. It was not just any ship, it was a vessel from a species long believed to be extinct. The crew, made up of beings that seemed strangely familiar but entirely foreign, stepped out of the wreckage with a quiet sense of purpose. The crew was human. They were the last survivors of the species called the Firstborn, an ancient civilization that predated the Galactic Concord by thousands of years. Their civilization had been wiped out in a cataclysmic war, the details of which were lost in time. The galaxy had long forgotten them, assuming they were nothing more than a myth, a footnote in the distant history of space. But the Firstborn were far from extinct. The survivors, having endured unimaginable hardship, had arrived with a singular goal: to reclaim their place in the galaxy. The Arath, who had believed themselves to be the true rulers, were unprepared for the revelation. The humans who had emerged from the nebula were not only technologically advanced in ways the Arath had never dreamed of, they also held knowledge of ancient forces, powers long buried beneath the ruins of time. The Galactic Concord, which had enjoyed a stable existence for centuries, now faced an existential threat. The once rigid hierarchies of power, where the strongest and most cunning ruled supreme, began to fracture. The forgotten species, the Firstborn, had returned, and with them, the potential to reshape the future of the galaxy. Despite their initial shock, the Arath were not easily intimidated. They immediately set out to understand the nature of this new threat. What they didn't realize was that the Firstborn had a powerful weapon: history itself. Through ancient techniques and forgotten sciences, they possessed the knowledge to bend the very fabric of reality to their will. The Firstborn had mastered technologies that allowed them to manipulate space, time, and matter in ways the galaxy had never seen. They controlled ancient machines buried deep within the core of their ruined homeworld, machines that could rewrite the laws of physics. These were not mere tools of destruction, these were keys to unlocking the deepest mysteries of existence. And the Arath, despite their vaunted intellect, had no idea how to counter it. In the Galactic Concord's capital, on the shimmering city-planet of Zyphera, the governing council was thrown into chaos. As the news spread, debate raged in the chambers. Some demanded a diplomatic response, others called for an immediate military solution. Yet, the presence of the Firstborn was not something that could be dealt with in the conventional manner. Their return represented more than just an affront to the status quo, it signaled a new era, one where the balance of power was about to shift in ways no one could have predicted. The Firstborn had not just returned to reclaim what was lost. They had come for something far more dangerous, to reveal the truth that the galaxy's rulers had kept hidden for centuries. The truth of the war that had shattered the galaxy long ago, and how it was they, the Firstborn, who had caused the destruction, something the Arath and others had erased from history to protect their dominance. As the leaders of the Concord scrambled to respond, the Firstborn's message was clear: the galaxy had entered a new chapter. The forgotten species had shattered the hierarchy, and a reckoning was coming. The news of the Firstborn's return spread across the galaxy like wildfire. What had once been dismissed as the ramblings of ancient myth became a stark reality that threatened to unravel everything. 1,000 voices, from the highest ranks of the Arath to the most humble of the Kestris, began to whisper the same thing: how could something this old still exist? And why did they return now? On Zyphera, the council chambers buzzed with activity. Representatives from all factions were present, delegates of the Vornai, who had long sought to maintain the galaxy's militaristic edge, the Selkai, who wanted to engage diplomatically, and the Kestris, who feared technological warfare. Each species had their own theory, but none knew the true scope of what they were dealing with. The Firstborn were not like any enemy they had ever encountered. In the heart of the galaxy, on the citadel of the Arath, the ruling elite huddled in secret. Elder Virion, the eldest and most respected of the Arath leaders, had led the investigation into the Firstborn's sudden return. He had long since dismissed them as a footnote in history, but now, their re-emergence had shaken him to his core. A man of profound intellect, Virion's fear was rooted in the unsettling fact that the Firstborn were not just a forgotten species, they were the progenitors of much of the technology that the galaxy had come to depend on. Before the fall of their civilization, the Firstborn had been the galaxy's true architects. Their grasp of quantum physics, biological engineering, and the manipulation of energy fields had been unparalleled. It was said that their world, long destroyed in the ancient war, had housed the original core of the galaxy's most powerful technologies. This was not just about military conquest, it was about knowledge that could not be easily erased. But why had the Firstborn kept themselves hidden for so long? And why had they chosen this moment to return? Virion wasn't sure, but there was one thing he knew for certain: this was not a simple reclamation of old territory. The Firstborn had come back for something deeper. Something far more dangerous. As the Arath began to dig into the ancient records, they uncovered something that had long been buried under layers of misinformation: a forgotten war. The Firstborn had not merely fought a battle, they had waged an existential conflict against the very fabric of the galaxy. They had sought to reshape reality itself, using their understanding of time and space to break free from the constraints of the physical world. Their war had not been a mere struggle for resources, but an attempt to manipulate the underlying laws of the universe. And then, as abruptly as it had begun, it ended. Or so it was thought. The Firstborn's final move in the war had been catastrophic. Their great power had turned against them. A devastating cataclysm had ripped through their homeworld, sending a shockwave across the galaxy that had erased all traces of their civilization. The survivors had retreated into the depths of the Zorlan Nebula, hidden away from the galaxy that had once revered them. For centuries, the galaxy had assumed the Firstborn were gone, lost to time, their once mighty empire nothing more than a myth. But the truth was far more complex. As the galaxy's leaders pored over the data, a grim picture emerged. The Firstborn had not disappeared, they had chosen to isolate themselves. They had retreated into the shadows of space, waiting for a time when they could return and finish what they had started. The galaxy, they had known, was on the brink of another cycle of war, a cycle that would once again require their intervention. And they were prepared. The Pride of the Lost, the ship that had brought the survivors back to the galaxy, contained something of immense value, a key to unlock the remnants of the Firstborn's ancient power. The ship had not simply been a vessel of survival, it had been a carefully constructed symbol of the Firstborn's final plan. The survivors aboard it were not just refugees, they were the last of a lineage that had kept the galaxy's deepest secrets. The Firstborn were here to finish their work. And the galaxy would soon learn that their concept of power, hierarchy, and control was about to be rewritten. In the lower levels of the Citadel, a clandestine meeting was taking place. A group of high-ranking Arath officers, led by the cunning General Torvax, had grown more and more concerned with the events unfolding. While the council deliberated over strategy, Torvax saw an opportunity for something more. If the Firstborn truly possessed the power to bend the laws of physics, he believed that there was a way to harness it for the Arath's own gain. The idea of using the Firstborn's technology to secure ultimate power was a temptation that many of the galaxy's leaders could not resist. But Torvax was not foolish enough to believe that such power would come without consequences. He knew that the Firstborn would never allow anyone else to control their secrets. As he plotted in the shadows, a darker question lingered in his mind: what if the Firstborn were not the true threat? What if the real danger lay in what they were hiding, what they had always hidden, and what the galaxy would have to sacrifice to wield their ancient knowledge? The game had changed, and the Firstborn were not just the past, they were the future. The galaxy stood at the brink of transformation, its once stable foundations shaking with the return of the Firstborn. Across the stars, tension simmered. Delegates from every major faction of the Galactic Concord scrambled to adjust their strategies, weighing the risk of embracing the new power the Firstborn offered, or opposing it. On Zyphera, the political capital of the Concord, the central government was fractured. Some, like High Chancellor Alira of the Selkai, argued that diplomacy was the only viable option. The Firstborn are not mere invaders, they are our ancestors, our progenitors, she argued before the council. We must seek common ground with them. We cannot afford another war. But others, like the hardline Vornai General Dracos, were not so easily swayed. You speak of diplomacy, Chancellor, but what if this is not the same Firstborn that left us eons ago? What if they are not here to talk, but to rule? They have the power to destroy us all in the blink of an eye. We must prepare for war. The debate was endless, and neither side had an answer. Meanwhile, the Arath, ever the masterminds of strategic thinking, remained silent. Their leaders, including the revered Elder Virion, were deep in their own discussions, trying to decipher the true nature of the Firstborn's return. Were they really the lost species from the distant past, or was there something more sinister at play? In the shadows of the Citadel, General Torvax's ambitions were growing. While the council wrangled over the proper course of action, Torvax quietly moved to seize control of the Arath's vast intelligence network. He began to secretly communicate with operatives stationed in the Zorlan Nebula, hoping to uncover more about the Firstborn's technology and the mysterious key they had hidden away. But Torvax was not the only one moving in the shadows. Deep within the Zorlan Nebula, a new alliance was forming. The Firstborn, led by the enigmatic and unyielding leader, Orcs, had begun to take action. Orcs, a figure of legend, was said to be the last surviving member of the ancient ruling class of the Firstborn. He carried with him the knowledge of their downfall and the truth that had been concealed for so long. Orcs's leadership was marked by a singular vision, not just to reclaim the Firstborn's lost place in the galaxy, but to ensure that their ancient technology and understanding of the universe would no longer be suppressed or manipulated by those who had seized power in their absence. The Firstborn were not here for power in the traditional sense, they were here to correct the very fabric of reality that had been fractured by the past. We will no longer hide in the shadows, Orcs declared to his followers, standing before the ruins of the once great Firstborn city within the nebula. The galaxy will remember us. The truth will be revealed, and it will shake the very foundation of every species that has dared to rewrite our history. The key that had been hidden aboard the Pride of the Lost was the first step in a much larger plan. Orcs knew that the Arath, with their vast resources and intelligence, were the greatest immediate threat. The Firstborn needed allies, true allies, who would understand their vision and not simply seek to exploit it. But would they find such allies among the current galactic powers? Or was the galaxy so set in its ways that it would blindly resist anything that threatened the status quo? As the Firstborn began to activate their ancient machines, the full scope of their power began to emerge. Hidden beneath the ruins of their lost homeworld was a network of quantum-based technologies, artifacts that could manipulate space and time itself. These devices, when used together, could reshape the entire galaxy. Some were weapons capable of tearing through the very fabric of space, others were tools of vast creation, able to terraform entire planets in a matter of days. The Firstborn's plan was to bring about a new order, a reality where they, the true originators of the galaxy's most powerful knowledge, would lead once more. But this vision was not one of conquest, it was one of restoration. They sought to correct the imbalance caused by the Arath's rise to power and the war that had silenced them for so long. In the heart of the galaxy, the Arath were preparing for the worst. Virion, though a master tactician, knew that fighting the Firstborn head-on would not guarantee victory. The Firstborn's power was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, and their knowledge was a weapon in its own right. Virion had heard whispers of the ancient machines and knew that they could alter the course of the war before it even began. As the Arath mobilized their fleets, General Torvax's own agenda took a darker turn. In his mind, the galaxy didn't need to be saved, it needed to be remade. If the Firstborn could provide the key to that transformation, he would take it. Torvax began to secretly amass an army loyal only to him, a shadow force that would follow no allegiance but his own. He was no longer concerned with the galaxy's future, his only concern was how to seize its reins and bend it to his will. The galaxy was no longer a place of stability. Alliances that once seemed unbreakable began to splinter. The Selkai, cautious and diplomatic, could see the potential in the Firstborn's vision but also feared the consequences. The Vornai, ever warriors at heart, prepared for war with a new sense of urgency, realizing that this was not just a conflict over territory, it was a conflict for the very soul of the galaxy. And all the while, the Firstborn watched. They had returned not just to reclaim their place, but to shatter the old hierarchies forever. The galaxy was on edge, waiting for the first move to be made. The tension in the galaxy had reached its breaking point. On Zyphera, the grand capital of the Galactic Concord, the leaders of every major faction convened in a historic meeting that would determine the future of the galaxy. It was an emergency council, convened after the Firstborn had activated their ancient machines and demonstrated a power that none of the galaxy's leading species had ever witnessed. For weeks, the galaxy had been on high alert. The Selkai, known for their diplomacy, had pushed for a peaceful resolution, attempting to broker some sort of understanding with the Firstborn. But their emissaries had not returned. The Arath had quickly mobilized their fleets, fearing that if they did not act soon, the Firstborn's power would grow beyond their control. Meanwhile, the Vornai had already begun to prepare for war, bolstering their military forces and launching reconnaissance missions to gain intelligence on the Firstborn's movements. But no one knew what the Firstborn truly wanted. "We cannot allow them to simply reshape the galaxy as they please," General Dracos of the Vornai declared, his voice heavy with urgency. "Their technology is too dangerous. If we do not take action now, we risk losing everything we've worked for." High Chancellor Alira of the Selkai stood at the opposite end of the table, her calm demeanor belying the deep uncertainty she felt. "We have to consider another possibility. The Firstborn have not attacked. They have only made their presence known. Maybe this is not an invasion, but a return. A return to reclaim what was lost, to set things right." Virion, the Arath elder, had been silent up until this point. The galaxy's greatest tactician and strategist, his mind raced as he weighed the options before him. He had seen the data, he knew what the Firstborn were capable of. But he also knew that their return was not just about raw power. There was something deeper at play. The Firstborn had never been conquerors in the traditional sense. They were creators, architects, wielders of the deepest secrets of the universe. "We cannot allow ourselves to underestimate them," Virion said, his voice firm but calm. "But we must also be cautious. The Firstborn have the ability to manipulate reality itself. We cannot defeat them by force alone. The galaxy is on the verge of something far more complex than a simple war. If we are to survive this, we will need to understand what drives them, and that means seeking answers, not just weapons." But before the debate could continue, an alarm sounded across the council hall. A transmission had arrived from the Zorlan Nebula, an encrypted message from the Firstborn themselves. The galaxy held its breath as the transmission was decoded. On the screen, a figure appeared, Oris, the leader of the Firstborn. His presence was commanding, his expression unreadable. The background behind him flickered briefly, showing images of a desolate landscape, the ruins of their lost homeworld. "Galactic Concord," Oris's voice echoed through the hall, his tone calm but filled with an undeniable power. "We have returned, not to conquer, but to restore what has been broken. The balance of the galaxy has been corrupted, and the time has come for that corruption to be corrected. We offer you two choices: join us in the rebuilding of the galaxy, or resist, and face the consequences of your ignorance. The room fell into stunned silence. I will not stand by as a shadow of history rises up to control us, General Dracos growled, his hand tightening around the hilt of his blade. We will fight for our place in the galaxy. But Oris's gaze shifted slightly, and a faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips. We are not your enemies, General Dracos. The true enemy is the false history you have built. The truth will be revealed, whether you accept it or not. We offer you the opportunity to be a part of the new order. But if you resist, you will face the consequences. The transmission cut abruptly. Chaos erupted in the council chamber. Some members, including the Selkai and certain factions within the Arath, remained hesitant, unsure if they should join the Firstborn's cause. But the Vornai were already bracing for war. Their fleets, stationed across the galaxy, were preparing for a full-scale assault. Meanwhile, in the Zorlan Nebula, the Firstborn were not idle. Oris had begun activating their ancient machines, large, cylindrical structures buried deep within the ruins of their homeworld. These machines were not mere weapons of destruction, they were tools of creation and annihilation. Their power could terraform entire planets, manipulate the flow of time, and even create rifts in space. The Firstborn were preparing to reshape the galaxy, to return the stars to their original, pure state. They believed that the galaxy's current order, the one established by the Arath and the other factions, was built on lies, on a history that had been manipulated to serve the powerful. Oris's goal was not to rule, it was to restore the original design of the galaxy, a design created by the Firstborn themselves. In his eyes, the current galactic hierarchies were a perversion, a distortion of what had once been a harmonious existence. The time for restoration had come. The galaxy would either accept the truth and embrace a new order, or it would be forced to break under the weight of its own corruption. As the war drum sounded and the factions of the Galactic Concord prepared for battle, one question remained: who would stand with the Firstborn, and who would stand against them? The galaxy was now a powder keg, with every faction standing at the brink of war. The Firstborn's declaration had shattered any semblance of unity within the Galactic Concord. What had once been a united federation of species now found itself divided into factions, each with its own vision for the future, each vying for control of the narrative, and each with its own set of alliances and enemies. On Zyphera, the political capital, the debate had reached a fever pitch. Chancellor Alira, who had advocated for peace, found herself in an increasingly precarious position. The Selkai, traditionally known for their diplomatic prowess, were now seen as weak by many of the other species. Their attempts at negotiation with the Firstborn had failed, and their refusal to commit to military action had caused them to lose credibility among the more war-hungry factions. The Vornai, led by General Dracos, were the first to mobilize their fleets in response to the Firstborn's message. Dracos was a man of action, and he believed that the only way to secure the galaxy's future was through strength. His people were warriors at heart, and they were ready for battle. The Vornai's massive warships were soon spread across the galaxy, ready to engage the Firstborn if necessary. Their tactics were brutal, and their resolve unshakable. For them, there was no question, war was inevitable. The Arath, ever the schemers, were caught in a complex web of intrigue. Elder Virion, the respected leader of the Arath, had long advocated for understanding the Firstborn's motives. But his more cautious approach was losing favor within the Arath Council. Younger, more ambitious leaders like Torvax were pushing for a more aggressive stance. Torvax, who had secretly gathered a loyal following within the Arath, saw this as a chance to seize power. He was not content with merely maintaining the status quo, he wanted to reshape the galaxy to his own vision. And he believed that the Firstborn held the key to that vision. Torvax had begun a covert operation to infiltrate the Firstborn's inner circle. He had dispatched spies to the Zorlan Nebula, seeking any information on the Firstborn's true intentions. But the deeper he dug, the more questions arose. He had uncovered something troubling, a hidden history, one that had been suppressed for millennia. The truth, it seemed, was more complex than anyone had realized. The Firstborn had not merely been the creators of the galaxy's most advanced technologies. They had been the architects of a vast, cosmic plan, a plan that stretched far beyond the physical boundaries of the galaxy. The Firstborn believed they had been chosen to guide the galaxy through an era of enlightenment. But their vision had been corrupted by the rise of other species, particularly the Arath, whose lust for power had led them to manipulate the galaxy's history to their advantage. As Torvax uncovered more about the Firstborn's original intentions, he began to question everything. Were the Firstborn truly the saviors they claimed to be? Or were they a danger to the galaxy's way of life? He knew that if he wanted to seize control of the Arath and secure his place as their true leader, he would need to make a choice. Join the Firstborn and reshape the galaxy, or fight against them and maintain the Arath's dominance. Back in the Zorlan Nebula, Orcs, the leader of the Firstborn, was not idle. He had begun the process of unlocking the full power of the ancient machines scattered across their lost homeworld. These machines, dormant for millennia, were the key to his vision, a vision of a galaxy where the laws of nature could be rewritten, where time itself could be manipulated, and where the very fabric of reality could be molded by the Firstborn's will. Orcs had gathered a group of loyalists, including the enigmatic Talia, a former scientist of the Firstborn who had once worked on the machines that powered the galaxy's oldest technologies. Talia was a brilliant mind, and her knowledge of the Firstborn's hidden secrets was invaluable. But as she worked alongside Orcs to activate the machines, she began to have doubts. The power that the Firstborn were unleashing was far greater than she had ever imagined. The machines could restore the galaxy to its original state, yes, but they could also tear it apart if misused. What if we're wrong? Talia asked one evening, her voice filled with hesitation as she stood in the shadow of one of the massive machines, its hum resonating through the cold air of their hidden lair. What if we're playing with forces we don't fully understand? Orcs's gaze was unwavering. The galaxy was always meant to be ours to shape. We are the Firstborn, and we alone possess the knowledge to wield this power. Those who do not understand are simply blind. But we will show them the truth. Talia's heart heavy with doubt, but she knew there was no turning back. The Firstborn's plan was in motion, and the galaxy's future would soon be decided. The war, it seemed, was already upon them. The Vornai were preparing for their first assault on the Firstborn's position in the Zorlan Nebula. The Arath, divided and uncertain, were caught between opposing forces within their own ranks. And the Selkai, the last remaining faction to hold out for peace, faced mounting pressure from all sides. As the fleets gathered and the forces of the galaxy's factions prepared to collide, one truth became apparent: this was no longer just a battle for control of the stars. It was a battle for the very soul of the galaxy. Would the Firstborn succeed in reshaping reality itself? Or would the galaxy's powers unite against them and crush their vision before it could come to fruition? The answer was uncertain. But one thing was clear: the galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy had reached the precipice. The first clashes between the Vornai and the Firstborn were imminent, their fleets positioned in the Zorlan Nebula, poised to launch the opening salvo of what was quickly becoming a galaxy-spanning war. On Zyphera, the capital of the Galactic Concord, the political maneuvering had reached a fever pitch as each faction scrambled to align itself for the inevitable confrontation. General Dracos, the unyielding Vornai warlord, had launched his fleet without hesitation. The Vornai believed in strength above all, and the Firstborn's rhetoric of restoration rang hollow in their ears. They saw their own survival as tied to the destruction of the Firstborn's ambitions. The Vornai were no longer concerned with alliances, only with victory. They viewed the Firstborn's power as an existential threat, one they could not allow to flourish. Virion, the Arath elder, stood in the war room of his fleet, observing the growing conflict from afar. He had long understood that war was a tool, but it was one he only used as a last resort. Yet as the situation unfolded, even his legendary patience was wearing thin. The internal division within his people had deepened. There were those who still believed in understanding the Firstborn's intentions, but younger Arath, like the ambitious Torvax, had seized control of the war agenda. Torvax had made his decision. He saw the Firstborn as a means to reshape the galaxy in his own image. If he aligned himself with Horus and the Firstborn, he would not only ensure his own power but also rewrite the very fabric of galactic politics. But as he began his covert negotiations with Horus, he found himself in a delicate game. The Firstborn were not as easily manipulated as he had thought. Their vision was absolute, and their goal of reshaping reality could not be bargained with. Talia, the brilliant former Firstborn scientist, watched the progress of the ancient machines with growing unease. As each machine was activated, a pulse of energy radiated through the nebula, warping the space around it. Talia understood the significance of these devices. She had worked on them herself in the early days of the Firstborn's reign. They were more than tools of war or creation. They were the means to control the very laws of nature. "What we're doing, we're playing with fire," Talia said, her voice trembling as she looked at Horus, who stood at the heart of the operation. "The machines are awakening more power than we anticipated. If we push them too far, we could tear apart the fabric of reality itself." Horus, ever resolute, turned to her. "The galaxy is broken, Talia. The balance of power is skewed. Only we, the Firstborn, can correct the chaos that has taken root. These machines will restore order. But at what cost?" Talia pressed. "You don't fully understand the consequences. We're not just altering physical space, we're altering time itself. The universe may not be able to handle it." Horus's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained calm. "We are the architects of the galaxy's future, not its prisoners. We will succeed, or we will die trying." As the Firstborn's machines hummed louder, the effects on the galaxy became undeniable. In multiple star systems, strange phenomena began to occur. Time seemed to warp in pockets of space, and gravity fluctuated erratically. Entire fleets, unaware of the Firstborn's power, found themselves caught in the distortion fields, unable to escape. The forces of the Vornai, seeking to engage the Firstborn, found themselves losing control of their ships, as the very laws of physics bent in unpredictable ways. The Vornai were not prepared for this. Their military tactics, which had served them so well in the past, were ineffective against an enemy that could warp space and time at will. General Dracos, furious and frustrated, ordered his fleet to retreat, but it was too late. The machine's power was already cascading outward, and a massive rift opened in the fabric of space, pulling several Vornai ships into an alternate dimension. In the chaos, Dracos realized the true scale of the Firstborn's potential. This was not simply a military conflict, it was a war for the very laws that governed the galaxy. On the other side of the galaxy, the Selkai had remained neutral for as long as possible, but they could no longer ignore the escalating disaster. The once proud diplomats of the Concord now found themselves caught between a burning desire for peace and the hard truth that peace was no longer an option. Chancellor Alira knew that the Selkai's position was untenable, and unless they acted quickly, their homeworld would become a battleground. Alira made a decision. In the dead of night, she dispatched a covert envoy to the Zorlan Nebula, hoping to broker a deal with Horus and the Firstborn. She was not naive, she knew the Firstborn were not a species to be reasoned with in the traditional sense. But there was a sliver of hope that, through negotiation, they could avert the worst of the destruction. After all, the Selkai had long been the galaxy's best diplomats, skilled at finding middle ground. Alira's envoy arrived at the Firstborn's hidden stronghold, where Horus awaited them, flanked by Talia and the other leaders of the Firstborn. The silence in the room was palpable as Alira made her case, urging Horus to reconsider the path of destruction and instead build a new order that would unite all species under a common cause. But Horus was unwavering. "Your species, Chancellor, have had millennia to correct the imbalances of the galaxy. You failed. Now, we will. The galaxy will no longer be ruled by the old powers and their petty squabbles. It will be ruled by the Firstborn." Alira's heart sank, but she refused to give up. And if you succeed, what will you leave behind? A galaxy of ashes? A fractured reality where nothing is stable, where nothing is certain? Oris paused for a moment, his eyes narrowing. No. We will leave behind the truth. The galaxy will be restored to its true form, one free of the lies that have plagued it for too long. The tension in the room was thick, and as the envoy returned to Zyphra, Elira knew there was no turning back. The galaxy was on the edge of something far more dangerous than war. They were on the brink of reality itself shattering. The Firstborn were not simply seeking power, they were seeking to redefine the very nature of existence. And it was only a matter of time before their plan reached its final, irreversible stage. The galaxy stood on the brink of utter chaos. The Firstborn, with their terrifying mastery over the laws of physics, had already begun the irreversible process of rewriting reality itself. Star systems were being torn apart, as the ancient machines they had activated resonated across the cosmos, warping time and space. The galaxy's greatest military forces, the Vornai, the Arath, and even the Selkai, had been rendered powerless in the face of the Firstborn's overwhelming power. Yet, the galaxy had not surrendered. Hope was not entirely lost. Amid the turmoil, a single spark of resistance flickered, the resistance of those who refused to bow to the Firstborn's vision. But this would not be a traditional rebellion. It could not be fought with armies or weapons alone. On Zyphra, in the heart of the Galactic Concord, Chancellor Elira gathered her remaining allies. It had been days since she had received Oris's rejection, and the galaxy had continued to fracture. The Selkai had long been the voice of reason in the galaxy, but now they faced their most difficult decision. To fight against the Firstborn, or to try to forge a new path, one of hope that would not erase the mistakes of the past, but allow for growth and a new order. We cannot stop them by force alone, Elira said, her voice heavy with the weight of the galaxy's despair. The Firstborn have altered the fabric of reality itself. Our fleets cannot fight them. The Vornai are stuck in a war they cannot win. We need another solution. Virion, the Arath elder, stood beside her. His people were divided, some eager for war, others still searching for diplomacy. But Virion had come to a realization: the Firstborn's power was not the greatest threat to the galaxy. The greatest threat lay in their unyielding certainty, their refusal to see any other path but their own. We must find the key to their vision, Virion said, his voice full of quiet determination. The Firstborn believe they are the saviors of the galaxy. But they are not gods. They are creators, yes. But they are blind to the need for balance, for compromise. If we can understand their ultimate goal, we might find a way to show them the error of their ways. Elira turned to Talia, the former Firstborn scientist who had long been at the heart of the operation. Talia had once helped Oris and the other Firstborn unlock the potential of their ancient machines. But now, she was a reluctant ally to the galaxy. She had seen the dangerous power of the machines firsthand and knew that if left unchecked, the Firstborn's vision would unravel the galaxy's very existence. I can take you to the heart of the Firstborn's operation, Talia said, her voice tinged with regret. But the path is treacherous. Once you enter the Zorlan Nebula, you'll be entering a reality where nothing is certain. The laws of time and space are being bent. But I know how to navigate it. If anyone can find the key to stopping the Firstborn, it's us. Elira and Virion exchanged a glance. It was their final chance. They could not wait for the fleets to turn the tide. The Firstborn were reshaping the galaxy in their image, and if that path continued unchecked, everything would be lost. We will do it, Elira said with determination. But we will need allies. The Vornai may have been defeated on the battlefield, but their spirit remains unbroken. We will need them, and we will need every faction that still believes in freedom. The Arath, despite their division, knew that this mission was their last chance to redeem themselves. Virion, the elder, reached out to his people, calling on them to join the cause, to reunite against the Firstborn's overwhelming power. It wasn't long before a coalition of desperate forces gathered, what remained of the Vornai fleet, a handful of Selkai diplomats, the last remnants of the Arath who believed in the galaxy's potential, and Talia, the reluctant guide who would lead them into the heart of the storm. Together, they embarked on a perilous journey into the heart of the Zorlan Nebula, a place where the very nature of reality was warped by the Firstborn's machines. The closer they got, the more the fabric of time and space seemed to bend around them, creating moments of disorientation and terror. But Talia led them with steady hands, her deep knowledge of the Firstborn's technology their only hope. As they neared the Firstborn's stronghold, Alira could feel the weight of the moment. The choice that lay before them was clear: they would either convince Oris and the Firstborn to cease their work, or they would have to destroy the machines and risk the complete collapse of reality. Inside the heart of the Firstborn's base, Oris awaited them. His appearance had not changed, but his eyes gleamed with a quiet, terrifying certainty. He knew the galaxy's forces were coming for him. He knew the final confrontation was at hand. "You've come to stop us," Oris said, his voice a calm echo in the chamber. "But it is too late. The galaxy will be restored to its original design. The balance will be corrected." Alira stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear that threatened to rise within her. "You may believe that what you're doing is right, Oris. But there is more to the galaxy than your vision. Balance is not found in absolute control, it is found in the diversity of the universe. In compromise, in choice. You cannot force the galaxy into your mold." Oris's expression hardened. "The galaxy has been corrupted by the choices of those who came before you. Your vision is flawed. The truth will be restored. The decision had to be made. There was no room for negotiation now." As Oris activated the central machine, the reality around them began to destabilize. The entire galaxy hung in the balance. Virion, seeing the magnitude of the situation, made a difficult choice. He activated the fail-safe code that Talia had secretly programmed into the system, an emergency override that would shut down the Firstborn's machines. But it came with a terrible price. The energy required to deactivate the machines would send a shockwave through the galaxy, one that could either destroy everything or bring about a new beginning. The machines pulsed, and the fabric of space tore as reality itself began to collapse. Talia turned to Alira. "We have to choose now. Let the galaxy collapse under the Firstborn's rule, or risk everything for a chance to rebuild." Alira glanced at Virion, then at the forces behind her. With a deep breath, she made her choice. Do it. The galaxy was on the edge of rebirth, or total annihilation. The machines powered down, but the price was steep. A massive rift exploded outward, unraveling the corrupted reality of the Firstborn. Their power, their certainty, collapsed. The galaxy was left in chaos, fractured, unstable, but free. And as the forces of the Galactic Concord began to rebuild, a new question emerged. What kind of galaxy would rise from the ashes?